Thank you. Thanks, Julio. I know Andy Chandler. I met him about a year ago when he was doing some work with NOAA. Good morning, everybody. Just a little bit of introduction about myself and what I do for NOAA and what our outlook is, sort of tentatively. I am new to this group, and I found out about this group because I came across the October forecast, 3-year forecast seminar that you guys held last October. Was informative to me for sure, and looked like a group I needed to make myself familiar with and try and let you know what we do and what our outlook is. So NOAA, you know NOAA from the Weather Service. That we are overall about a $5.5 billion federal agency, a bureau that falls underneath the Department of Commerce. We're made up of primarily 6 line offices that range from counting fish to launching satellites. And I can go through those just real quick. NESDIS is the satellite, National Environmental Data and Information Service Satellite Group. The National Weather Service, not responsible for the snow, but responsible for the data. National Marine Fisheries Service, National Ocean Service, the Ocean and Atmospheric Research Office, and the Office of Marine and Aviation Operations, which is our uniform service. And they primarily operate ships that are used for surveying and keeping ports open after events, and then also doing ocean research. And they also fly planes collecting weather data as well. It's a broad responsibility that NOAA has, that we touch many different parts of science. Very science-intensive organization that sort of over the years has lost track a little bit on their facilities planning, maintenance, and repair. So I've been with NOAA for about 5 years, and I took over as the director of what we now call the Facilities Engineering Office for NOAA just over a year ago, October of 19. And so since I've been aboard, I've tried to influence what I can and make a few changes to help us interact better with the community out there and to plan our projects better and to address our requirements a little bit better. So we've had about a 5-year sort of a lag, a stall in our capital investment planning process. We've recently re-kicked that off, restarted that. And so by FY23, we look to begin a larger investment as we garner congressional support. To date, it's been sort of reactive how we've constructed our larger facilities. Many times they're politically driven. We have one going on right now up in Alaska that was very, very much a politically driven reconstruction of a facility that we really wanted to move away from, but our agency is very susceptible to that influence. So that's part of that is a pier at Ketchikan, and we have 2 other piers that are coming up that are not under construction. One is under design back at Naval Station Newport that NAVFAC is managing for us, and then we have another one down in Charleston that we're in the development, the planning and development phase of right now. But we look to, in 23 and beyond, we look to garner congressional support for a more deliberate capital investment program. We'll see things like recapitalization of the sampling campus here at WRC, and maybe prior to that, we will begin redevelopment of facilities out at the Manchester Research Facility, which is adjacent to the Naval Field Depot out there in Bremerton. Near term, what we do every day, what we've been doing every year is from 20 to 40, $50 million worth of projects that are primarily related to deferred maintenance. We know as a bureau, we have in the range of $600 million worth of deferred maintenance. We've identified that through the implementation of a Corps of Engineers sustainment model using Builder Our builder data is not completely mature, so I have an FCA program where we're assessing all of our facilities. We're about 2/3 of the way into that effort right now. We anticipate completing that over the next 2 years. That'll give us a little better idea of projection for what we need to spend on deferred maintenance. We've established a deliberate prioritization process to identify and prioritize the deferred maintenance that needs to be addressed right now, and that's really what's driving our major effort every year right now. I think that's about it. It's we're a small group. We have political hands that influence a lot of our operations. I have about 20 people, most of whom are project managers spread across the United States. We do work from the Arctic to literally to the South Pole. We have the furthest northernmost laboratory that collects atmospheric data and environmental data in Barrow that we just recently constructed. And we've got a project at the South Pole that we are seeking support from National Science Foundation to help us execute some upgrades down there for one of our line offices. But I think that's the short and sweet of it. I personally have worked for a number of different federal agencies before I came to NOAA. I worked in the private sector for about 10 years in a design office out of Houston, Texas, for a international consulting firm, and then I moved to NAVFAC and worked for them for about 9 years. The Corps of Engineers, I worked overseas with them for about a year, and I'm in the Navy Reserve, so I've had my hands in a number of contingency operations around the world. I came to know about 5 years ago, like I said, and I plan to stay here in the Seattle area and look forward to meeting and working with a few of you in the future as our paths cross. So yeah, Julio, I think that's about it for me, unless there's any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on with our agenda here. Next order of business was an update on COVID. Ms. Mandy Kime will give us a safety update status, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the committee on essentially what the contracting community has seen or has experienced due to COVID as far as disruptions and whatnot. Mandy?
Good morning, thank you. So probably the most notable thing that's been causing my phone to ring lately is kind of a revised reopening plan for Washington State. And the main thing that I want to clarify with everyone is that the governor's orders do not change the construction agreement. So the rules that we had in place prior to the kind of winter holiday breaks and such are still in place. So essentially, what we've been doing is what we're going to continue doing moving forward until such time as that construction agreement is adjusted or our reopening metrics look a little different. So that's kind of the Washington State snapshot. And to that end, I went through AGC of Washington's COVID resource page and decluttered it a whole bunch. So we took all of the kind of the old stuff from, basically a year ago, and basically just made sure that it's very clear, cut and dry. We've got HR resources, we've got the most recent AGC safety forum where we talked about vaccinations, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then we also have, our entire suite of safety resources for managing COVID. And it's just in a lot more clean, easier to access format. So you all are welcome to utilize anything off of that website and just know that it's the most current. And then that leads me to January 29th, OSHA actually issued new guidance on COVID. And we've gone through all the resources that we have. AGC has AGC of America has gone through all those resources, and they actually came up with this statement that I can post on our website, but it basically is telling you that despite this new guidance from OSHA, our state was already more restrictive than what OSHA had published. And so everything that we have as far as safety best practices for COVID-19 on our website, AGC of Washington's website, is compliant with what is expected of you as an employer from federal OSHA. With the only exception is our program or our plan doesn't really talk about the first item in the OSHA order, which talks about having union representatives involved in the development of your COVID plan. Our COVID plan has been in place, and it has been through multiple iterations and gone through the Department of Labor and Industries as well as local consultants and the like. So we are good there, and so if you're following the information that we've got posted, you should be in compliance with everything that's expected of you. So lastly, I'll just say we had a safety forum last week, and we brought in an attorney from Miller, Nash, Graham and Dunn. Her name is Amy, and she's been our partner throughout the entirety of our COVID response. And she helped us tackle the big question about vaccination policies, and the like. What's important to note is employers are not required to have a policy about vaccination. Furthermore, employers are not required to require, or really at this point can't really require their employees to vaccinate, with very few exceptions, healthcare being one of them. You could, in theory, legally require your employees to vaccinate, but there's a lot of legal nuance to that. And again, that's only really relevant to healthcare workers. Outside of that, especially in Washington State right now, we don't have enough vaccines to be requiring people to vaccinate. And so the current best practice guidance that we are being told from Amy, our attorney partner, is that it's better, our effort is better spent in strongly encouraging our employees to vaccinate and even offering incentive programs. But that also opens the door to challenges. If you are going to incentivize vaccination, there are going to be people on your team that maybe can't for a variety of reasons. And so you will need to consider the legal aspects of that dance, so to speak. If you're requiring something or encouraging something and incentivizing it, but someone physically cannot acquire the vaccine, then you're going to need to make some sort of provision in your program for that. So as we move forward, obviously we will be taking a look at this. AGC's Legal Affairs Committee is forming a task force on vaccines just to help the contractor community tackle this next layer of our COVID response. And so that work is just now kicking off. But again, like I said, there's not enough vaccines right now for us to even have the conversation about requiring them. And we'll kind of monitor the situation as far as vaccines being distributed and keep folks updated that way. So any questions for me?
Mandy, this is Jeff Arviso Manson. Who all is part of that task force you mentioned?
So as of right now, there's I think 2 or 3 folks off of our Legal Affairs Committee, the actual attorneys that serve on Legal Affairs Committee, and then they are soliciting for AGC members to participate, namely safety professionals and HR professionals that serve through the Safety Committee and AGC's HR Best Practices Committee that was just established, so that we can have kind of a well-rounded approach to this. So we are seeking a safety professional or 2, and I believe an HR professional to round out this task force. It was literally just this week that it was decided to form the task force. Okay,
thank you. Hey, and the other thing that's been brought up in the past, recent past, is with the governor's roundtable and AGC's involvement in that, along with other organizations. And you mentioned the the construction agreement and all that, but since many or at least some of the contractors, or a lot of the contractors, are considered essential businesses. And how's it been discussed? What is the likelihood of getting more earlier phasing for essential transportation construction workers for vaccinations?
Yeah, that conversation has come up a number of times, and it sounds to me like, based on what David DeHaan has shared with me, that labor is interested as well in elevating construction essential workforce up that hierarchy. But it just takes an opportunity for this roundtable of individuals to actually sit down with the governor's office. In their most recent meeting, it was the task force, or the governor's roundtable, all the participants kind of talking about their issues and challenges, but it was not with the governor to renegotiate, because they weren't looking to adjust the construction requirements. So when that meeting happens, absolutely, that'll be a part of the conversation. My understanding too, in talking to a number of our members that do work in occupied hospital facilities and the like, they are, because they're doing that work and they're doing it in a medical facility, they are being vaccinated. They're being given the option to vaccinate. And so we've had a number of our members have employees vaccinated just because of the nature of the work that they're doing.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you, Mandy. And I would say you certainly addressed one of the comments that I've heard in the past, internally and externally, about what to do with vaccinations policies for team members and employees. And, you know, I think you hit it in the head there very concisely. There's not a whole lot you can do other than encourage and hope that that they take heed of the advice and move forward and just continue to stay safe and follow the guidelines. So, okay.
Absolutely. There's also, just really quickly, for those of you that want to start the process of encouraging, there's already a bunch of materials, and I'm working to get them on the AGC website, but the Department of Health as well as CDC have created all sorts of posters and things that you can use as an employer to encourage. So we'll get those posted soon. Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, regarding supply chain disruptions or any updates from the contracting community on what they've seen as far as disruptions due to COVID that I guess we don't know yet. I'll kick it off briefly for everyone. I can say that I've had several subcontractors on some of our active projects, I guess, complain about the extreme costs rises in PVC material, PVC piping, and even steel decking and bar joists. But not necessarily say that it's not available or that it's going to impact the project schedules. Essentially, it appears to be making a cost issue or cost conflict for the contractors. I don't know if anyone else would like to jump in from the contracting side and share some thoughts or recent experiences regarding this.
Julio, this is Jeff again. We have also noticed a issue getting timber and a great increase in timber prices. There's probably lots of different reasons that are being discussed on that, but we have been hearing some association of the lack of large timber materials related to COVID. So anyway, that's one from our side, timber.
Right. No, that's a very good point, Jeff, and I'd say price as well. Even for, you know, what you would consider not to be tons of goods, but, you know, even as simple as formwork lumber, dimensional lumber has spiked significantly. Again, what we see is more of a cost than a lack of the availability, but certainly that, you know, they follow hand in hand. So that's a
Hey,
good
Julio.
point. Yes.
Yeah, this is Lloyd Malone from Tenista.
Hey, Lloyd.
Hey, I read an article 2 days ago in the ENR magazine. They do a 20-city survey because we're having trouble getting pipe. But again, I think nationally, like lumber is up 44% since last year, or 49%. It's a real good article. Again, we have PVC pipe going up about 30% from last year. So yeah, we're definitely experiencing it.
Yeah, definitely. You guys for sure. Good point. Thanks for bringing that up.
Hey Julio, so on this note, whether it's COVID related or not, for Corps of Engineers, NAVFAC, Coast Guard, NOAA, I would strongly recommend you do some increases in your engineering estimates on solicitations that you are preparing or putting out now, because prices do not appear to be falling anytime, if at all, anytime soon. That's for dang sure.
Absolutely.
Hey Jeff, this is Justin here. Yeah, great recommendation. We're actually seeing some of that in some of our recent bids coming back in terms of overall price increase. In general, are we seeing on some of the other, you know, instead of the pipe, steel, concrete, are we seeing any increases on concrete pricing? Or maybe some of the manufactured products such as like HVAC systems and those things?
Hey, Justin, I can tell you, well, one thing that is affecting concrete right now is a shortage of fly ash. So that probably has something to do with concrete and price, at least for the type of concrete that we're providing for our jobs to you and others. Fly ash is a problem right now, driving up the cost.
All right, excellent, great feedback. Anyone else before we move on to the next item?
Yeah, hey Jeff, Sid here from the Corps of Engineers, and yeah, I really appreciate this information. We'll be passing on to our cost engineers as well, so appreciate the candid feedback. Over.
Thanks, Sid.
Hey Julio, just real quick here, Justin from NAVFAC. I did want to relay a couple of the updated changes with our NAVFAC, or with our NAVFAC specific policies, and I'm pretty sure it applies to Army Corps for handling the same kind of conditions. But you know, our SecDef had issued out a memorandum back on February 4th in response to the executive order 13991, which is basically requiring face masks on any of our installations. I know most of our contractors are already complying with it, but probably one of the bigger changes is now it's mandatory required both inside and outside to the greatest feasible possibility. There are a couple of exceptions, of course, you know, for transiting through security and a couple of job specifics. But I just wanted to pass it on to everybody. Is just you know, as these executive orders come out there and refining things, I'll keep passing along the new requirements for you guys here. If you guys need a copy of our SecDef memo, let me know and I can pass it along.
Hey, Justin, question for you. Does that executive order, or how are you guys administering those cases where someone says, okay, yeah, executive order 13991, okay, but I have a medical whatever that says I can't wear a face mask?
Yeah, there are some provisions. There's a couple caveats in the executive order there, and it was relayed also with the SecDef memo for those medical specifics. And I'd say for a contracting community or construction community, you know, those are just those things you just have to work with your contracting officer and FIADs if it becomes an issue. So to date, I haven't heard too many issues yet.
Roger, thank you.
Justin, would you mind sending that to me, and then I will just, in the follow up to this meeting, I have a few things to send out, so I'll go ahead and include that.
Yeah, sure, not a problem.
Thanks so much.
Hey, Sonia, Justin, Mark Sleminski, great point to bring up. And I think one thing they've reminded us, in at least the USACE chain of command, is that the executive orders then are promulgated through like essentially a DoD policy or follow-up, so that the executive order provides the broad guidance for us to implement, and it's in the case of the face coverings, it's pretty much in place. But there's quite a few executive orders out there too, and we just had some reminders from our headquarters to say, yep, those flow, and the DoD makes the interpretation and distributes. So I guess I just relay it's basically informational at this point. So thanks.
Hey, questions for all for Mark and Justin and others is because those are executive orders right now, and we've seen some of them come through on amendments. But do you foresee some or any of these turning into like 252s? So and then now they're new clauses, or what are you guys feeling or seeing is going to happen? Because there's so many out there now, it's almost overwhelming which one to even keep track of. But do you see this being more official, or just stick under the EOs for now because they could be temporary?
Yeah, I know we're going to touch on in a minute some of the new administration items, of which I'm not overly read in more so than anybody else. But I think a way to think about that is that the executive order is a broad statement of intent that then can flow through various methods of being promulgated. So to your point, they may end up as a FAR clause or something else, but that kind of gets back to the point that was made to us, is that there's a formation of policy and guidance that then flows down in response to an executive order, so it can be implemented. In this day and age, the executive order basically goes from pen to broad distribution instantly without the possibility for the policy and guidance to flow. So they just kind of offered us some tactical patience, so to speak, to have that happen.
Well, we heard we're not going to legislate by executive order, so there won't be any more coming out, right?
No idea.
Sorry, I had to say that. And we're being recorded, so I've got it official now.
Nice. Well, we're right in the middle of item number 3, new administration, and Mark already kind of started us, so might as well just keep rolling there. Mark, thanks for joining. The floor is yours.
Thanks,
priorities update.
Yeah, and just make sure I assume the audio is coming through okay, because we just had a conversation, but just do a quick mic check.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, so like others, I think we're staying tuned and seeing what's out there. Couple of observations. There's essentially a current president's budget, and then I believe there's going to be a formation of a new president's budget for 22. Certainly has been understandably some shifts in priorities, reemphasizing climate change and some other aspects. Some efforts related to southwest border construction that was essentially put on pause, and Sid may have better info than I, because he served down there for a while in a key role and still gets communications, but I believe that was a 60-day pause for essentially assessing the status and making determinations of way ahead. So those things affect us in USACE, and the organization is staying flexible and in front of them to the extent possible. I guess what I'm hearing from a DoD perspective writ large, there's not an expectation of any kind of major shift in terms of this defense strategy, peer-based competition, who we need to focus our efforts against, as well as probably even the budget in the near term. So that's good. Some stability would actually be nice. It's been a bit chaotic for a few years. So a few perspectives there, and then open to other thoughts. And Sid, if you had any more intel on the border mission, feel free to chime in.
Hi, this is Jordan Howard with AGC of America. I'm here in DC, the other Washington. And I think I'm just right outside the perimeter fencing, but I did speak to USACE headquarters about this, and it seems that as far as the border wall pause and evaluation, a lot of that's being handled with the local division, so Southwestern Division primarily, but there is a pause there, and it's very expensive. And Mark, I think you were given the sort of the explanation on the executive orders and when they come into effect. There has been a record number of executive orders, as I'm sure most of you know, and most of those need to go through the rulemaking process. But as you pointed out, in this day and age, there can be guidance issued from agencies and other things that kind of move before that. The rulemaking process is sluggish for a reason, or it should be, and you know, I think that time period is important. One, to get an adequate and a good rule, as opposed to one that's sort of rushed, and it also gives everyone time to be educated, both not only the government but the contractors and everyone who's involved in the supply chain.
Thanks, Jordan. That's a great perspective from headquarters, because we're seeing it at district level, so that's a broader perspective.
Hey, can I pile on to that? So I have at least 7 open or pending task orders or solicitations out there. And it seems like in some cases a contract specialist will, I don't know where they're getting the guidance from, and it's from varieties, either NAFAC or Corps of Engineers, administrating offices throughout the country. And so it's varied. And one executive order will come out, and under a task order that still is pending, I'll see this come through just a few days later, and it won't pop up anywhere else. And then on another one, another office, it'll come out, but a whole different executive order. So things are just, this whole, you know, so much is flying through, and some offices are doing some things like right away. Some are going, okay, let's stop. Let's do this globally as NAFAC Northwest or Corps of Engineers Seattle or Portland, or pick a district. Instead, man, just please provide some guidance or control to the contract specialists on what to do, because it's so chaotic, and it's keeping track of which one I mean, obviously the one that comes through on that task order, we know we have to acknowledge it and deal with it. But then, or is it going to come up on another one that could be outstanding? So just maybe an observation and perhaps a request or plea for slow the train down a little bit, stop, evaluate, and then provide guidance to your contract specialists for consistency would be most appreciated. Thank you. Over.
Hey, I appreciate that feedback. I think that reinforces the message we're trying to relay in terms of the opportunity to promulgate that guidance, as opposed to sort of immediately take what's publicly available for executive order and incorporate it. And we've actually got an audience with the Chief of Engineers next week. He's coming out for a visit to the Seattle area, and we're building up a couple items to talk to him about. And I think that's a great topic, just to make sure he's tracking that. Some industry feedback is that it's kind of scattered. People may be applying them immediately or close to immediately, but then not doing it consistently, which neither of which is ideal. Over.
Yeah, and hey Jeff, it's Justin here. Any chance you might be able to share offline a couple of those examples, just so I can help identify if it's a systemic issue or if it's a maybe an office specific?
I most certainly can.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
All right, very good. Well, moving along here, I'll turn it over to Andy for item number 4, CMCC cybersecurity requirements update.
Good morning, everybody. I don't really have a I guess information to share update wise, but I did want to take the time, because I know this was brought up earlier, I believe in last meeting. Just if anybody has any more information about, I guess the first question, has anybody been awarded a project or task order and had to go through any verification of the CMCC requirements and kind of proving that, and then maybe a discussion as well. And I haven't had any opportunity to kind of go about this or have any info on it, but how the subcontracting community is doing as far as getting these certifications, or what the different government entities are requesting of subcontractors. So really just an open discussion to continue that, because it's not going away, and I know many companies are further ahead, further behind. So kind of just an open discussion.
This is Jordan again. So I've been following the CMMC. As of right now, you shouldn't have seen any requirements for a level certification. They did some pilots that are out right now. From my understanding, none of them are construction. It's still being rolled out. It's over a 5-year plan or period. It's starting to look like construction will either be towards the end of the year or maybe next year. It seems like each time that there's the schedule keeps getting pushed a little further back, which doesn't mean that it's not something to that it doesn't take time and effort. But from last I heard, there's less than 100 certifiers, and there's 300,000 companies that need to get certified. I will point you to the accreditation body. That's sort of the non-government entity that's certifying the certifiers, so to speak. They do town halls, and they've been doing them more frequently recently, and I'll put it in the chat box. Hopefully it comes out okay. And there's one next Tuesday, and I think that's good. And I've actually used their submitted question. I've emailed them. They've gotten back pretty quickly. Not to say this isn't. It's going to take a lot of time to get done, and because it will. It looks like you shouldn't see it in any contract. Now there's still, to caveat that, there's still cybersecurity requirements that everyone sees, the DFARS that you're supposed to be self-attesting that you're doing. But as far as like the 1 through 5 number so far, you shouldn't see that in any contract. Over.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we've been, I guess it hasn't been really clear in some of the solicitations that we've been looking at, and we've, Absher has just been asking the general question, hey, confirm, and then we'll list the requirement that it's just the basic self-assessment at this time, just to clarify. So, no, that's good information. Thank you.
Yeah, I might add, so right now what's required is the NIST 800, which is a much lower certification level. It's self-certifying, but I didn't realize this till the day I was supposed to be certified. You do have to go to a website and claim that you are and attest to it, where before, I think upon a contract award, you could then, attest that you were compliant. But there is that one little requirement to go to that website. The other one, the CMMC, it's a few years out. It's going to be expensive, but that's tomorrow's issue. It's out there a little while.
So I do believe that you have to go to Spurs, and it's like supply.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the website. And then next month, probably March 17th, I'm going to do a webinar. AGC of America is going to do a webinar with one of those accreditors from CMMC, and my hope is that he'll do a webinar and he'll say, like, this is what I'm looking at. If I come to your company, what should I expect? This is the kind of thing, and try to get as much information there as early. Over.
Hey, and I'll use this opportunity again. Thanks, Dennis, for speaking up. That it is going to be expensive for a lot of contractors, big contractors. It'll be more of a burden than a financial concern. But for our small businesses that are out there, we would then urge AGC and then our federal partners here to just be considerate and help try to minimize that impact and the effect it's going to have on the small businesses that are so important for us being able to build all these projects for you out there.
Yeah, I would echo that. And one thing I could throw in, so far what I've heard is just the assessment of having somebody assess your company. They're forecasting it's kind of like a financial audit, and they're targeting like 30 grand or so for that. So it's a big expense just to get audited, and then they're going to say, here's your plan to get certified, which will have a lot more cost on top of that. But also for me, selfishly, I'm 100% federal. So everything I do would fit with this, CMMC. But if, the other guys out there, the Abshers of the world that do federal and commercial and private, I think they're going to be required to set up totally independent systems for all their financial data, all their control and everything else. It's a lot of work for the big guys too. It won't be easy.
Yeah, Dennis and Jeff, just to give you guys an update here within NAVFAC, we did raise some of the feedback that you guys provided during the last month's or last quarter's meeting back up to PAC or ESH3. And so they now have it on their radar there for assessing just exactly what the impacts are and see if we can get some early guidance to push out for solicitations in the future. But we are tracking right now that it is going to be, I believe it was a 24 or 25 requirement. So, it's still just that standard NIST 800 self-certification that we're looking at right now. So, but it is our radar. We are engaging with our ESH3 contracting officers and our construction policymakers there to make sure that we've got full awareness before we start stepping into this one.
Yeah. Great feedback. I can add a little bit to this, and I think that probably would put a bow around this one. But from a national general contracting perspective, I can say that I believe it was back in November, the Walsh Group was required to submit a self-assessment of readiness, and I believe there was a deadline associated to it if you were intending on participating on perhaps TS work or whatnot. And I know we did submit and push that through. I just wonder if anyone on the call has any feedback or is aware of what has been seen from those efforts. If there was a deadline to it, you would assume there should be some record or feedback on I suppose the state of the contracting union as far as what's at stake, what's the level of readiness really for the contracting community and how far off we are. And I just put it out there. Is anyone aware of that? Maybe Jordan, maybe you've heard something.
I haven't heard of anyone being denied. It seems like, from what I can tell, folks were pretty active on registering in spurs. I think something came out like the SAM profile, or I'm not sure, but I haven't heard any horror stories, and I feel like I normally would.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. Appreciate the feedback. Suppose this may be one of those subjects that will remain as a talking point just for future updates. Moving on to the next item, the Airfield tunnel repair at Jblm. Lessons learned. Mr. Slominski, would you do the honors?
Hey, Julio, thanks. Again, quick mic check.
Good.
Awesome. You never know with Teams, and then it's really awkward talking to yourself for a while. So, no, I appreciate this, and Sonia, in a minute, I think if you can pull up some things to share. To set the stage on this one, it seems like it was about a year ago. It might have been one of our first DoD coordination meetings. We had a great discussion. I think it was over at the office in Federal Way, where Keywood hosted, and we had a chance to talk about some big topics. And somewhere along the way, we mentioned, hey, there's something going on at McCord that we may have to deal with, and it's kind of amazing, about a year later, to be able to have a conversation about what took place to get that executed. So the basic context that what occurred, and we've got 3 different things we'll show here just for folks to enjoy and walk through. About December timeframe, during one of the typical high weather or high water events at McCord, it became evident there was some kind of issue going on. And for context, back in the early stages of constructing the airfield, the engineers recognized that there was a fundamental challenge in front of them, which was the Clover Creek drainage basin. So that drains essentially Spanaway and things to that direction, and then narrows it into two different creeks that come together and then naturally flow. I believe it's into American Lake, but they discharge on the other side of McCord Field. And so the engineers at that time decided they looked at alternatives to move the creek or to do something else with the creek, and ultimately decided to channel it and captured it in two 12-foot diameter metal culverts that were essentially welded or bolted in place on grade and then rolled into the creek bed, and then backfilled and then paved over for the runway. And then they did an extension of this structure a few years later as they built the taxiway and apron. So fast forward a few decades and maybe lose some corporate memory of these things existing at all, and you end up in a situation where they start to have sinkholes forming and wonder what the heck's going on. So they called out for some help, and we were fortunate that the Corps of Engineers was able to utilize the emergency response authorities that are inherent in what we do usually for communities, to mobilize some forces to go out there and support the Army, who's the real property owner at Jblm, and of course the Air Force is the mission owner. That initial response included doing some surveying and some excavation and some safing, and so some fairly significant excavations were dug to expose the situation. It also involved being able to provide support for some remotely operated vehicles for survey. And ultimately what was recognized is that these old culverts had been just completely, they've been shoved out of the way, they've been corroded, they were no longer in alignment, and what had happened is just material had, it was like a piping and seepage failure. Material had been washed through the culverts over time, and it just completely failed above, and sinkholes formed. So the mission owner ceased full-length runway operations, and the Air Force went out and put in place a displaced threshold to shorten the runway, and then there's a call for help to do what was necessary to fix the situation. So I guess from one standpoint, how long should metal culverts last? About 50 years. How long did they last? About 70. So an engineer might say, hey, we got 20 more years than we're supposed to out of it. But if people sort of aren't tracking that requirement to maybe do some preventive maintenance or a recap, then it can become a real issue. And so Sonia, I think the first thing we'll do is we'll pull up, there's a PowerPoint that actually showed the overhead views. And I believe that file auto plays, so once you pull it up, it may scroll through at a fairly fast pace. But what it does is it shows some aerial imagery that the DoD was able to capture in McCord Field, and it starts with the initial emergency response and works its way through about the October timeframe. So that's a neat thing if you can pull it up and show it, which is the file that's
sure, it's the one that's the movie.
The movie, you bet. And then after that, I can provide some additional context, and then we'll walk through the other two attachments. So I'll wait for you to pull that up and play it.
All right. Yep. Does anybody see it?
So far, we see a different file. We see the file that's the
okay. So that's not working yet. Just a second. How do I do that? Okay, so sorry about this. I just I just need to start over.
Yeah, it should just play as a PowerPoint when you just.
It does, but it's hard to select the right screen.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to start it and then try to share my screen, and hopefully.
Okay.
Shoot, it's not.
If it's not working.
Probably have as many things open as.
Oh, there we go. Do you see it?
There it is. Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks. So I admit that goes by quickly, but it gives a little bit of an orientation that I can describe. And we have two more just presentations that really get into the nitty gritty. So I guess I'll start by saying for all those who thought that the DoD could have an aerial image of anything to high resolution, you're right. So so that file was actually provided to us by some folks over at the base. But what it did show in the initial photos was the significance of the sinkholes. So the sinkholes formed on both sides of the runway, and Sonia will show the quad chart next, which gives the overview of the project, which is the other file you just had up a second ago, the single chart. And so as we talk about the timeframes, this is a good way to summarize what we were asked to do. And so it's starting in the upper left of the quad. It walks through the background of the project scope. And so this was a FSRM funded project. In other words, repair by replacement, not a MILCON. So that in of itself means that it could move out fairly quickly. It doesn't require a line item appropriation of Congress. But it was a significant project, as you'll see by the programmed amount and working estimate. The overall scope there was to replace those failed sinkhole-inducing drainage culverts that were under the runway, taxiway, and apron. The structure that was put in was 1,800 feet long and about 50 feet wide. It was put in as reinforced concrete, and it's officially classified as a bridge based upon that span. And so some folks were highly confused about why we're building a bridge over McCord Field, and the answer was we're putting it under it, and they were even more confused then. But that is what it's classified as, and so that also means it has to be from this point forward inspected and managed as part of the bridge infrastructure of DoD and the United States. This also involved repairing the airfield lighting, replacing the pavements, of course. Another interesting attribute is that the location is in close proximity to the firefighting training pit. And as many folks are aware, there's consistent concerns about PFAS as a contaminant of concern in and around where firefighting operations took place. No different here, it was actually in a plume. And so this may be the first project DoD has done in which PFAS was treated incidental to construction. The purpose of the project was not a remediation project, but it was to ensure that the water leaving the installation would do no harm relative to the PFAS levels, which is a very stringent 70 parts per trillion. And then it was also to restore stream flows, manage it to 100-year standards so that we had capacity and provide fish migration. So I'll stop there for a second because there's a couple of pretty profound things happening just in that scope. As best as we can tell, that's the longest reinforced concrete bridge under an airfield anywhere. Like, we haven't found one anywhere else that has that in place. The concept of the PFAS, again, as I mentioned, is somewhat revolutionary relative to this being done incidental to construction. The ability to provide fish mitigation or migration has some attributes with the culverts case when you think about how that's playing out across Washington. So a lot of concern as the project kicked off about how would we be able to get these things done without getting too sidetracked through the processes of approvals and agency reviews. And to a certain extent, that was supported by the emergency declaration for the project. Agencies were kept in loop as to what was happening and have had an opportunity to provide feedback as the project moved forwards. The schedule and milestones, well, let me first talk about the PA and CWE. So current PA is at 117 million. That included some increase of PA we had to do based upon site conditions, notably extensive groundwater in place. And then the CWE at 91 million is what the project is going to come in at. It's well enough along, we have high confidence in that. It was done as a design build, and so Bryce Civil Constructors was awarded the contract, and they retained KPFF as the DOR. And this was done as a best value two-step. It was a fixed price contract, but largely built around unit quantities, and it included an early completion incentive for the runway reopening. So we found a couple of those are strategies that are being considered as best practices as we socialize this. The use of the unit quantities is important because if you have an FSRM funded contract, it allows you to deal with design development and differing site conditions without necessarily impeding progress or having to suspend the work to get additional funding. We did have to get additional funding in this project, but we were able to get after it in ways that the unit quantities handled the work that was needed to do immediately while additional funds were sought. And then I think this is the first time we've done early completion incentive on a project in Seattle District. Feedback from industry that it's somewhat prevalent on the outside for projects of critical nature. And the belief in the field is that that was one of the significant attributes as to why the project met its milestones ahead of schedule. Quick update of what those milestones were. They're quite aggressive. from Industry Day of 13 March through the advertising the RFP for design build on 31 March. Proposals received 1 May. The contract was awarded on 28 May, so a very quick term but effective source selection process to go through those best value proposals. NTP followed nearly immediately thereafter, and then the full length runway was restored on the 21st of December. The way the contract was formed, the need date for the runway full operations was 15 January 2021, and then the provision said that the contractors would propose upon their suggested schedule. The final successful awardee would have their schedule incorporated in the contract, and that would establish the runway complete date. And then the early completion incentive would be based upon that contractor's proposed runway complete date. So in the case of Bryce, they proposed finishing the runway on the 14th, so 1 day early. But they obviously finished it several weeks before then to earn a significant portion of that early completion incentive. Just to talk briefly about some of the things that were accomplished in the bottom right. The quantities are pretty impressive in terms of groundwater. I think it's 762 million gallons that were pumped and treated, and always with an effluent below the 70 parts per trillion. So quite the project, and I'll pause here for questions before we go into the next slideshow, which is more of a walking the way through the features of work. Sonia, if you want to pull up the slides that show the features of work, then we'll walk through that and we'll see what kind of questions there might be out there. So on this slide, you see a couple things that were noteworthy. In the center picture, operational runway. And so as you kind of can see from those aerial images, this project cuts right across at about a third of the way down the length of the runway. And so the C-17 missions continued and other missions continued over the site. That included stringent restrictions to crane height that were promulgated in the contract. But that picture, kind of gives it justice that that there's adequate separation, but not extreme separation. And on the right, you'll see it's just one of the examples of the senior visitors that came out. This project had significant attention across the Department of Defense. That's actually General Van Ovost, who is the Air Mobility Command Commander at the 4-star level, and we were hosting significant visits quite often. Next slide. We'll show some panoramas that kind of track through. So if you can advance down to the next one there, Sonia. Yep, so this next one just says the panoramas from Heritage Hill over time, and you can kind of scroll through those slowly and we'll get to the next slide after that. Yep, so this is a view that just looks over the job site, basically going from the downstream side to the upstream side. So keep on trucking and we'll just go through the panoramas without further dialogue. All right, so this one talks a little bit about the groundwater conditions that were in place, and so not surprising since we're building something that wasn't an old stream bed that it's going to be a high groundwater table. Contractor set up a row of dewatering that completely surrounded the site for groundwater, and then they also set up on the front end a pretty substantial bay of pumps to capture surface water. As you can see in the photo on the left, the groundwater was always prevalent just below the surface, and so they did a good job of pumping down to the adequate level, but not over pumping, just enough to allow us to get the site safely excavated and the foundation systems in. Next slide. This just highlights the magnitude of what was going on. You could almost relate that we had an active quarry and construction site in the runway, like not adjacent to the runway, but in the middle of the runway. So there you see a picture of a C-17 on approach over the site as they did the excavation, and then over to the left is where they did the material handling on the runway surfaces. Next slide. So the design build aspect of the contract only stipulated that it had to be a reinforced concrete structure and that it had to have the parameters necessary for the stream flows and fish passage. The proposal then allowed a solution to be presented. I'll let you know without getting too far into the source selection aspects that we did receive many variations of proposed solutions. The awarded contract involved using the BIBO arch system. And so this shows some of the precast panels. They were delivered one truck, one arch per truck. They're about 6 feet tall, and that's essentially a half arch you see on the left. And on the right, you can see the keyway system. So later on, you'll see, but they essentially crane them in place, set the foundation end inside a precast footer that has a slot in it. And then they merge the two together at this keyway that allows the reinforcing to join. And then they pour a keyway pour across the top to join things together. The keyway or the arches themselves came from Kashmir, Washington. Again, one truck at a time coming over State Route 18 and wherever else they trucked them from. And the footers came from Spokane, Washington. Next slide. So the first arches went in on the 16th of September. So if you think about time frame, we had NTP for the design build contract in June, and the team just worked diligently to work with the contractor and the designer to approve submittals, to review designs, and to allow progress to continue to move forward. So there you see the first arch being placed. It's a twin crane operation in the middle, and then there's some perspective shots on the left and right that show what it looks like from the side. And you can see the precast footers laid out in front. So very effectively sequenced work, essentially excavate, demolish the old culverts, continue excavation down to footer depth, lay out the footers, get the arches in place, and build the stream bed in real time. Next slide. Some more photos of airfield operations ongoing, including a neat shot that one of the PEs took that shows a 3-ship of C-17s over the top of the crane in the distance. Next slide. So this shows that aerial image that we excerpted out of the aerial photos. That was as of 14. So this gives you orientation. So we started the arch placement on the 16th of September. Less than a month later, it had progressed from the inlet, which is on the right, to beyond the footprint of the runway. And as the contractor got far enough along, then they could start the backfill operations to be able to get engineered materials in place and pavements in place to support runway opening. Next slide. So hopefully this one comes up. This should show the precast footers and arches as it comes up on the screen. There we go. So now we're looking from, I guess you're really going from the outlet towards the inlet end of the structure, and there you can see the precast arches in place. They also started forming the stream bed real time, and that has both a low channel and a high channel cross section to it. So essentially it's like a U shape that would have the high flow channel and low flow channel allow deeper depth in the middle. Next slide. Next one's kind of interesting. The contractor took the opportunity to do a Veterans Day salute. So this was how they staged the site for the 11th of November, and put the flags up and lit them up, and that received some neat feedback from the leadership of the installation. Next slide. So this gives some idea of magnitude. It doesn't quite do it justice from distance, but there you see, what it looks like in terms of the width of the structure, and that's the length of the structure in the right picture when it was probably about 70% complete. So light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. It also gives you an idea of how that low flow and high flow stream bed was constructed. And then this is before they put in the LED lighting. So as part of a fish passage attribute, it has LED lighting to provide some ability for fish to navigate. I guess it replicates daylight to a certain extent. Next slide. Just shows the precast elements going in for the wing wall. And next slide. Getting into the paving windows, this shows the typical paving activities taking place, but as we had to remind the team, it's a little bit like painting the Sistine Chapel, I guess. What everyone remembers is the paint job on the ceiling as opposed to all the structure and engineering that holds it up. So similar here, lots of work to get the culvert or the reinforced concrete bridge in place and backfill, but paving and painting and striping and roofing was important. Next slide. So catching a weather window in December can be difficult, and so the contractor did a good job preheating base course and then closely monitoring available conditions, and ultimately caught a good weather window to get the paving in. Next slide. This just gives you a panorama looking existing at the left and new at the right, and the criticality of that joint can't be underestimated. And you've got a really a transverse joint right in the middle of the runway, and an exceptional job being done to compact that and make sure that it is a well-maintained and in-place construction joint. Next slide. And then, fortunately, everything came back in place in time to capture the 2021 high flow season. So this shows a picture at the outlet condition. I'm not sure exactly how many CFS are going through that day, but that's how it handled it. And at that point in time, the contractor was able to disengage their dewatering system and allow Mother Nature to push the creek back through. Next slide. And yeah, this is one of those cases where sometimes some projects just seem to have someone above smiling on them. And so literally this is the final inspection. So double rainbow to call an end to the paving. Next slide.
That's it.
That's it. Okay. Yeah. So open for questions or comments or thoughts, and I believe Sonia, you were planning on sharing at least this slide deck, as I recall, is available for anyone.
Yes, I will do that.
All right. If no questions or comments, I appreciate the chance to review that, and really appreciate. That's just one example of all the projects that take place with our federal partners out there. We can't get it done without you. Over.
Super impressive work.
Yeah, very nice job. Absolutely. Okay, let me take over. I gotta select the right screen as well. Okay, so moving on, item number 6, beta.gov updates. Mr. Howard.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was a really cool presentation. So thank you. And I said this before, but thanks again, Sonia, and everyone else for inviting me to this meeting. And Joel, welcome. I've always been impressed with this group, and I see a lot of heard a lot of different forums and everything else, and this is, I think, is one of the kind of stands above a lot of others as being one of the most effective. So just wanted to give that shout out. I think I was supposed to also talk about sort of the going back a little bit on the Buy American executive orders, and this is just kind of an FYI for our federal partners, and just things that contractors probably already know, but I just put in the chat box the Biden, things here in DC seem to be so partisan, but one of the few things that is gaining bipartisanship is more requirements for domestically sourced materials, which is fine and everything. The concern is that when the requirements move too fast and too quickly, that the supply chain and everyone else can't adjust. It takes time for the government to be educated. It takes time for contractors to be educated. So I just sort of wanted to flag this for our federal partners. Going back, the Buy American executive order, it still has to go through the FAR process. It doesn't take away from any of our trade agreements, from what I can tell. And but this is going to be something in the future, so it might be a good idea for the agencies to kind of brush up on the waiver process if there's just certain materials that are required that are not domestically sourced. So I just kind of wanted to flag that. There's a FAR rule that kind of increased some percentage of Buy American for construction. It's unclear if that was frozen with Biden's regulatory freeze. I've reached out to the FAR Council, and they're reaching out to the White House, but it's just, this is something that's coming, and I think it's good to be kind of updated and educated. As far as the beta.sam updates, so I got to tell you, from the effort, or as everyone knows, the former FBO, the new beta.sam that advertises all the projects, has just been broken and was rolled out very poorly. And we've worked with GSA, who owns the website, to fix this and to work on it. And with a lot of push and help, frankly, from AGC of Washington, they hear us. We've done some working groups, and you know, at the end of last year, I got a call from the commissioner of FAST, which is the entity within GSA that owns this website, and they said, look, you know, you have our attention now, and you know, we didn't think this was a big deal, but we now understand that it needs a lot of work. We're going to get, so there was an update, and I'll put this in the chat box. Hopefully everyone can see it. So on Tuesday, they did here, I'll put the full website. They did give an update on some of the things that they were working on with beta.sam. I think, you know, frankly, and if anyone saw it, I'd love to hear their opinion on this or offline, but it seems like they've really listened to a lot of our recommendations. They're working on the search function. Just give you an example, if prior, if you typed in courthouse into the website, the search engine, you would get something like 900,000 hits. And if you typed in GSA courthouse, you would get over 3 million hits. And usually when you get more specific, it should get smaller. They reasoned, and they came out on this presentation last week. They said, you know, we understand why people don't want that. Originally, we thought more information is better. You know, I think they understand now that just like a Google search or anything else, you really need to tailor that. So they announced that. I think a big takeaway is that they're updating, and I think I have it right here. Yeah, so the new design for beta.sam, it's going to switch over to sam.gov. It's being launched in April 26th, and the whole system will be integrated in May 24th. And it'll just all be sam.gov, and everything's supposed to be pulled over. And some of the improvements will be rolled out then. The Deputy Commissioner for FAST is going to invite us, and I'll share that invitation with the folks on here and others to do a working group or a listening session with her on the things that we, you know, frankly need to be fixed. But you know, they've done things like they've added saved searches. You know, before you couldn't save your search. They've done some things for alerts. They also, before you could only see something like 10 projects per page, and that's brutal. They've updated it so you can have a 10, 25, 50, or 100 results. You know, I think there still needs to be a lot of work done. Some of that has to do with, I'm not sure how much I think this is a factor, but one of the things that they said was, you know, educating other fellow federal agencies and how to enter in the data correctly. I'm not sure, but it does look like they're making progress. You know, and AGC really was, and they'll say it was pretty much the association that was pushing this the hardest, and AGC of Washington has done great support for this, but it does look like they're making progress. They're addressing our concerns, and, you know, frankly, it's good for everyone. It's good for the government with adequate competition, and it's good for contractors, so we don't miss these opportunities. So I'll just kind of stop there. But I would recommend you guys watching the videos. I was skeptical, but I cautiously pleased with the work that's being done, and I'll make sure to forward any invitation we have with the Deputy Commissioner that should take place next month.
Hey, Jordan, thank you, and keep the pressure on, my friend. Keep it on. That all sounds so much better, and let's hope that it continues to develop beyond what it has been. And the things you've said are so important. The searches, it's been horrible. So thank you for that, and yeah, keep it up.
Okay, excellent. So moving on to Contract Cloud demo. Michelle, do the honors.
We were going to have, this is Sonia, we're going to have Mark Slominski introduce this. We had a separate meeting, and so he's going to introduce his experience with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Sonia. Mark. Just for a quick introduction, do appreciate Michelle providing this, and it is something she had a chance to display to several of us as part of kind of a subgroup of this audience. Seems like it has some potential promise, and I believe, Michelle, it has somewhat of an audience in some of the Department of Defense agencies, if I'm not mistaken. And so appreciate you providing an orientation to the team here.
Thank you. All right, I am getting this screen up. Are you guys able to see the shared screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So it's good that we jump into this right after the conversation about Beta SAM, because I share a lot of those same frustrations with Beta SAM, and kind of the evolution of this came from that exact same thing. And what we've done is really built our own, essentially a workaround to this, knowing that it's going to be improved eventually. And this is our way of taking that information that's out there, and instead of having to do the traditional method of sorting and searching and looking through this, I've been that person who has been the capture manager, who has been the one responsible for finding the opportunities, going on to know that afterwards we're all going to sit around and evaluate these, and if we spend any time on something that we're ultimately not qualified for, that's just wasting invested time and invested energy in something we could have been working on that we did have a chance. So taking all of that information, what we did is we built Contract Cloud, which is the opposite of every other government tool, to be something simple. So what it does is when you log in, you see opportunities here like you would on Beta SAM. And instead of having a bar where you can search for a courthouse or a GSA courthouse, you've already filled out a complete profile of who you are. I like to compare this to like the eHarmony versus the Match.com. This is who I am, this is what I'm looking for, and any contract that comes up in those parameters that I've already predefined is going to be matched to me. So each day when I log in, I get my notifications every day. I log in and I can say, oh, this looks interesting. This looks like something I would want. I can go ahead and say, I like this. So I've just liked it, and that's it. If I want to look at more details, I can click at View More, and it's going to show me these details. And ultimately, there's not much else to it. If I click on this link, it's going to take me here to Beta SAM. So I've kind of just bypassed the way that I had to go in the other way. I'm tracking through here, which means that now that it's on this list, I have it saved in my likes. And the reason why this is important is because, as a lot of you guys probably know, in Beta SAM, if you add yourself as if you start following something, it by default sends out to every single other person who's following that opportunity. It says, hey, guess what? Manson Construction is now following this opportunity. And you're like, I didn't want everybody else to know that. You just told all my competitors that I was following this. So now you can privately track these, just like that. So we go back to the new ones. Oh, what is this? This is in Puerto Rico? I don't know. I like emergency stuff, but it's coming up too soon. Maybe not. So you can add that to your dislikes. I'm clicking this too fast. So that's how this one is. If I go into my disliked, I see the ones that I've added in here, and they've got my little thumbs downs. The other part of this is you can kind of keep up with your team and see, well, who has liked it and disliked it. So before you even go into a go meeting, it's already kind of shown in there. if you haven't checked them in a while, they're going to go into this category, missed. These were already due, and you missed them. So that's what we've got here. And once you like them, they move. Are there any questions?
Oh, sorry. I guess I didn't see the opening there. So this is pretty dang interesting. Is this I'm assuming this is a paid service, or what is this? How do we get access to this?
So as of today, it is a paid service. The reason why is because we have to be able to afford to keep building out new features in it. We want it to be something that everybody can use without it being limited to those who can afford it and those who can't. Our purpose behind this is to make it a level playing field for those small businesses that just can't figure out how to use BetaSAM. But as we're learning more, it's not just the small businesses who are running into that problem. So we're at this kind of crossroads where we either have to raise money from investors, and this is a little bit more background, to be able to provide it for free, but we're targeting user growth, whether it comes from paid subscriptions slower, or we're able to raise money and then we can add everyone on for free. So we're basically here to let you guys know that it exists. We have the ability to add more features, whatever, like this pulling teeth to get FAS and GSA to work with BetaSAM. We have access to that same data and can configure this however is needed. And we're just looking for, the ability to do so at a large scale.
Yeah, great. Hey, and this is definitely, I think, what you pointed out here, Michelle, this could be definitely handy for all contractors, large or small businesses for sure. But the other thing that still I know in talking to contracting officers and specialists throughout the various federal agencies is they are still themselves struggling greatly on getting stuff onto BetaSAM, at least workable for them. Maybe that's just a training thing on the federal side. I don't know, but I've heard it unsolicited actually from several contracting officers. So I don't know if this necessarily helps the federal agencies, but if not, or either way, do our federal partners online here have any input or thought about how BetaSAM is going to be more work-wise for you as a federal agency? Over.
And Mark Slominski, I guess I can offer that there certainly has been recognition of the industry feedback and an opportunity for us to use a forum like this to hear that, synthesize it, and then provide it within federal channels. And I guess ideally it's contributing to what Jordan briefed earlier, where the system improvements are taking place. I think Michelle's got a product here that tries to get after a bridging solution to that, and for that it's certainly great to share with the audience here for understanding. Over.
Okay, thanks, Mark. But maybe I'll just restate my question. So for whether it be Corps of Engineers, Coast Guard, NAVFAC, NOAA, do you believe, or are you hearing from your contracting officers, contracting groups, procurement, difficulties in the use and functionality of BetaSAM? Or are you hearing these changes are going to be are helping? Over.
Hey Jeff, it's Justin here from NAVFAC. I'll have to check with our contracting officers to see if things have improved. I know when BetaSAM was originally released, we were struggling the same as with our construction community in terms of posting and finding. information, but I haven't actually synced back up with them specifically on any improvements in Beta SAM since our last discussion at the beginning of the fiscal year. Over.
Okay. Well, again, I'll echo. I have spoken to several of your contracting officers and know that they are struggling. So I would just echo. I would restate again. Maybe keep that on your alert level, so to speak, because it's not. If we might have access to the data, but if we can't hear it, if we can't get the right stuff because they can't put it on there, then that's not good for any of us.
Yep, no, definitely concur on that one. So it's, and like I said, I just haven't synced up with them yet to see if they're still having the same troubles moving forward, but appreciate the feedback.
One of the things that we found is that a lot of times, you know, the government has switched over to this category management system where they're using the product service codes and everything is drilled down to these different categories. And that's how the funding is flowing through from what I understand. And so it goes into these very granular levels of where things need to be coded. So the keywords might not pick them up, or the categories might not pick them up, or they might not be in the next code that you'd expect. And a typical search is going to, you're just capturing, if you look, I'm going to see what's in 236220 set aside for total small business in this zip code, you might get 10 things. But if you do, I'm going to look at what's in all construction, you're going to find 10 more things that are in that same zip code that are also in that next code that didn't show up. And so we've started basically cross-referencing, not based on these search parameters, but based on the data. What is it that you can perform? Who are you? And how does that, you know, where do they overlap the most? Because Beta SAM just, even with FBO, it was like that. You know, when I was searching, I had 17 different searches because if we missed something, then everyone was looking at me going, Michelle, we weren't at this site walk and everyone else was at this site walk. So, you know, how did we miss this? That was a $10 million job and it's your fault. So that's kind of where this paranoia comes from and how we started doing it this way.
And Michelle, this is Andy. Quick question. How does Contract Cloud differ from like the GovWins, the what's another one, GovTribe, GovCon? Kind of how do you differentiate yourself from those?
Yeah, so those are basically a big database of everything you could possibly imagine. They just scrape all of the data and hand it to you. And now it's up to you to go find what you need. And we do the opposite. We understand who you are, and then we give you what matches to you. So instead of saying, here's access to everything you could possibly want, set up your own searches, dig yourself, we're just giving you the things that you need. But you can be confident that it's what you would have found yourself had you been doing that digging. So instead of spending 3 hours going down the rabbit hole of, well, what was awarded last time and who did it go there and let me find all these things, you might not need to know all that. You just want to know what's coming up and if it's, you know, relevant to you. So that's how it's different. Plus, it's a whole lot less than those are.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Michelle, do you have to log in every time you want to see your, you know, potential matches, or is there kind of another alert avenue?
You have to, well, in your email notifications, it will tell you the names of them in the email. Mm-hmm. And then when you log in, that's when you can press on what you want to do with them, but you'll get the names of them in your emails.
So in your email, you can, just from your email, you can just not even touch it and it's no big deal, or you just click yes. Does it pull you right in, or is it like a same login, like trying to log into Beta SAM? Is it pretty simple?
Oh yeah, it's totally simple. From your email, you can just say, click, I want to go to see them. and then, you know, it'll remember your password, like from your thumbprint, if you're doing it from your phone, and then you're in there. And so you could be, you know, sitting in your car waiting for someone in the parking lot, and then just review them right there in a minute in the morning. So it doesn't have the two-factor or anything like that, because we're not actually storing your data. We're just kind of putting a different screen in front of what you would see to Beta SAM and searching it a different way. So there's nothing of yours that's like kept in the system, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm going to stop.
Very cool. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
All right.
Julio, I think
Very good. Any other questions or feedback? Otherwise, it seems to me like Beta SAM should hire Contract Cloud to fix their problems. Anyway, oh, I forgot we were recording this. I shouldn't have said that. Moving on. Item number 7, the UFGS specifications, priorities. Mr. Slominski, do you want to follow up on this item from previous meetings?
Yeah, thanks, Julio. I guess this is sort of a standing reminder of an opportunity to highlight anything that we've come across as a group that we wanted to put some cognitive brain power behind on what the issue is and potentially what a recommended update to the UFGS standard would look like. So I don't have any specifics right here, but certainly open the dialogue to see if there are any others that that have highlighted some things we'd want to put in the parking lot or put on an agenda item. And I think we've talked in the past that this forum could be something where, as we identify a handful of them, we could use this forum to rough out what the change might look like, and then use the process that the whole building design guide affords to submit a suggested change. So opening that up to any items we'd want to include. Thanks.
Mark, I can speak to it a little bit, being the design manager at the Joint Regional Confinement Facility Design Build Project. I'd say, my apologies. I presume this is more addressing it from a design build perspective, more than anything. I can say that there's some specifications where I found that government reviewers either expand on what the intent of the specification should be, and that turns into a never-ending circular effort, circular logic of what to do with the specification. Not sure if it's really that there was ever a need to update the spec as much as it was understanding how to properly interpret it and agree with it. I'll say one example right now, and I don't know if Jason Ritter is on the line, but he may be aware of this. The special inspection specification is one that I'm seeing that there is continuous feedback and comments that continue to come up months after the design has been issued for construction. And it seems like we have to continue to clarify what the intent is or what we're doing. And we're certainly sure and confident that we're satisfying all the construction criteria for sure. The special inspections will not be missed, and they will be documented, and you know, all the requirements per IBC and UFC will be met. Yet it appears like perhaps some government reviewers may have a different interpretation of how they want to see the specification rolled out. So it's kind of tricky for me on this one, Mark, if you ask me, because I can tell you from at least from the Walsh side, we don't see an issue with it. We'll follow it to the T. Yet we issue it based on that interpretation, and then we get feedback from the government saying that we're not following the intent, and here is why. And yet you follow that path and you realize, well, that's not necessarily accurate. So That's the feedback I can offer from, you know, from one instance from the contractor side of things. The other thing would be having a, you know, more liberty to edit the spec in a design build environment, which there is some liberties to that, but there's still certainly other restrictions as well. It just depends on the reviewer or the reviewing team, you know. It's a kind of a hit and miss. Either the teams don't have any problems and construction goes through with no hiccups, or there is a difference of opinion in interpretation during design development, and you get into a conflict over semantics on a piece of paper. And my apologies for my dog. He's getting all excited because, you know, how much I've struggled with these specs.
I know. I thought he was pretty psyched about the conversation.
He's like, come on, Max, let them know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think Jason is on the line, so could hear his perspective. And I guess that's a great example, Julio, is that the intent of this item would be to create a short list, recognizing that there's a process in place that changes to specs can be proposed, and the thought that maybe if it's reinforced by, you know, almost like submitted by the DoD, you know, coordination committee of an AGC chapter, maybe it has some more weight to it. So special inspections could be one of those items, and then I guess the thing to ask would be what would we change? Not for dialogue today, but we could include, you know, a line item on a future meeting to say we want to talk about special inspections, or, you know, 2 or 3 other top specs, and then what specifically would be submitted for changes. And Jason, I think you had a chance to dial in, if I'm not mistaken, to see if you had any thoughts about the approach.
Yeah, I guess I would just share one thought, because I think what's unique about the example that Julio gave is that it's a Division 1 spec, and so that is somewhat of a challenge, right? It's pretty easy to talk about recommendations as it applies to Division 2 through 40 whatever, right? Because they're generally focused on the technical work that's being accomplished. So I know what Julio's talking about as it applies to the contract, right? And so it's somewhat unique to design build, because typically a contractor wouldn't, you know, the Division 1 stuff would be edited up front by the government to the point that we can put all the intent we want in there. And I guess what I'm getting at is, yeah, it's challenging with those Division 1 specs because there is intent, right? I mean, that is, you know, fortunately, unfortunately, a lot of Division 1 stuff does include the government's intent. And so when you have that in a design build arena post award, it creates challenges. So yeah, probably a lengthy discussion on what that looks like, because I do have some thoughts. It's been a challenge for years in terms of, do you pull all the special inspections up front into the Division 1 spec, or do you bury all the special inspections in the back end in the individual technical specs? And both answers are correct. But when you have government entities that have opinions, it gets to the intent piece that Julio's talking about. So yeah, certainly, right, Mark, as you said, right, it's not something we'll solve on this meeting, but I do think it's something worth talking about, and maybe it's even broader initially as a Division 1 type of discussion. Over.
Right.
That's a good point. Division 1, and maybe there's also room for a suggestion of, are there Division 1 specs that should be pick A for design build and pick B for design bid build. And an organization could propose in a design build, it should cover the following features. Something like that is sort of the spirit of what we're talking about here with this topic.
Hey, Mark, the other comment I had, this was interesting. This came across yesterday, actually, as it relates to another contract that we have with Walsh, but it's really more of a government internal thing. As Jblm as an installation makes changes to their design guide, which for the most part means they give specific edits to the UFGS specs. What design branch in Seattle said yesterday was, even, you know, they don't that they have a rigorous process in place to then sort of validate those before they wholesale put them into contracts. So that was interesting because I mean, I knew that we sort of validated stuff before we just drop it in a contract, but I didn't realize that Design Branch in Seattle had a process for that. So maybe, I guess my point there is if we're doing that, if the Corps is doing that with JBLM design standards, you know, why don't we wrap contractors into that discussion potentially to say, hey, here's the new stuff that the installation is suggesting as edits to the UFGS specs. We're looking at it from an engineering standpoint, but, you know, hey, contractor, look at it from a execution standpoint and what kind of feedback do you have? So it might be a little bit wishful thinking, but perhaps there's an opportunity there. Over.
Hey, Julio and Mark and Jason, I just want to weigh in real quick here. Down with AGC San Diego, we've had some success looking at these specific issues. And Sonia, I'll forward you the slide deck that they provided me about 1.5 years ago. But what I would recommend, you know, is take a look at that, take a look at it within this group here, and then identify maybe some key sections, whether it's a technical section or say a Division 1, so we can start building on that. You know, that briefing tool is how I kind of look at it in terms of what we need to focus our efforts in on the UFGS revision committee, you know, the back end once the change request gets submitted. So I'll send it out to Sonia, and you can distribute it out to the rest of the group here. But it'd be worth taking a look at it. You know, I think we should probably just, you know, hit a couple of high points, not necessarily try to change the entire world on it. But there are definitely a few that at least I'm tracking internally that probably need to be refreshed. You know, specifically, you know, commissioning and acceptance, I think, is a little obsolete compared to current trends and capabilities. But I'll leave it at that at this point.
Great, thanks, Justin. And thanks for the feedback also there, Jason. I agree. You know, I guess to wrap this discussion up on this subject, I'd say probably the better starting point would be the items that the government sees objections or issues from their own reviewing committees or technical engineering branches regarding reviews of design build projects. So I can certainly come up with a list of items that I realize, you know, there were several comebacks here that perhaps shouldn't have been. You know, the UFGS gives you the base spec, and it allows you to edit it based on very prescriptive instructions. And if you don't get to the same point, then clearly there's a information disconnect. So this shouldn't have happened. Perhaps this is a spec that we should look at. In addition to just the special inspections, one that is quite an obvious subject at this point. But certainly, you know, you guys administer design build contracts day in and day out. So I would also encourage the government side to perhaps come up with a list of what they feel would be worthy specifications to review, and certainly from a contracting standpoint, as a contractor, I would be more than glad to provide feedback, and I know others here in the committee would as well. I mean, it is our business, and it helps us all in the end.
Yeah, Julio, like I said, I think you know, kind of like what I've done before in the past is present the latest changes that are coming once I receive them from our change boards. What I'd say is you know, not to table it per se right now, but take a look at the kind of the template that I'll push out to Sonia here, and I'd strongly encourage, like I said, if we could go ahead and identify maybe a few to take a look at, you know, collectively here as a group. You know, to make sure we've got, you know, what is the specific issues, what's the latest trends, or you know, like I know like painting and coatings is always one of those where it's definitely obsolete compared to the latest and greatest. You know, so we can get those recommendations prioritized within the overall Tri-Services change review board. So it's, even though we can discuss and we might have our own opinions locally, you know, either within the government or within the contracting community, you know, there's a pretty laborious review process that it has to go through with all the various agencies to make sure everybody's on board, and also coordinating with other industry partners on the back end. So, but this just kind of helps provide at least some recommendations for them to focus their efforts moving forward and get these things updated. So take a look at it. I think you guys will see it's a pretty simple format, pretty simple template, and I think we can make some pretty good headways moving forward.
Julio, may I make a suggestion? I know that we have had this item on the agenda for at least a couple of our quarterly meetings, and perhaps we could consider forming a smaller subcommittee of contractors to meet in one meeting here, maybe in the next month or so, to flesh out a short list to get the ball rolling so that we can make some headway at our next quarterly meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. I definitely see that. As a matter of fact, I wrote down we should set up a spec revision committee to some extent, or a subcommittee like you mentioned. So absolutely, and I'll certainly be I'll volunteer to be part of it for sure.
We do have a few more minutes on the call on this meeting. I would take volunteers right now and add them to my notes if anybody would like to be involved.
I'm going to volunteer Jason Ritter.
Thanks, Julio.
That's right.
Julio. And of course, we will solicit the entire group for feedback via email, and if you could respond as little or as much to those emails as you can, that would be really helpful to the process.
Yeah, and I'll there's a couple people I have in mind on the core side that I'll guilt into doing it. So I'll get you some other names.
All right, great, thanks.
Very good. I think that brings us to the conclusion here of our meeting. Great feedback, great insight from everyone. Appreciate the participation. I'm going to put it out there once more for parting shots, and if nothing else, then everyone can hopefully have a great weekend.
Hey,
to add?
Yeah, hey Julio, Justin here. Just a couple quick things I'm thinking of right now. With the incorporation of both NOAA and you know, with Coast Guard also on the calls, we may want to change the title of this group. Since it's not necessarily a DoD specific, it's more of a federal coordination committee. Just kind of putting it out there, just so we're not being inclusive of DoD only. So the other one, and I want to throw this one out to the group for potentially a topic for next quarterly's meeting, is the use of innovative technology out on the construction sites. I think it's no secret that federal construction, typically we're behind in the ability to use technology on sites. One of our priorities or initiatives, I should say, for this year is to help kind of bring us up into at least the 21st century, early 21st century. So what I'd inquire is if you guys can help us maybe pull together some of the latest trends, some of the best practices you guys are seeing within your private or public construction projects here, just so we can at least start advocating to at least hit the same mark if we could. Over.
Yeah, good feedback. Thanks, Justin. Anyone else?
Yeah, hey Julio and Sonia, Mark Slominski. So just thanks again for putting this forum on. You know, you think about it, we've been meeting for, I guess, a little over a year or so, but great opportunity. And as was mentioned earlier, it's recognized by folks at you know, the highest levels of AGC as well for us just working together collaboratively on items like this. And we've worked quite a few issues. including working our way through COVID, preventative measures and so forth. Also letting folks know that I don't think it's news that I actually serve in 2 different purposes, one in USACE and one in the Air Force as a reservist. And about a week ago, they came out with a position move for my reserve assignment. So I'm going to be the senior reservist at the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center. And with that comes a request to do an extended amount of reserve duty. And so you'll see me kind of back out of the USACE responsibilities here for the foreseeable future. Not totally disengaged, but removed to the extent that I can focus on the Air Force items. But this forum is on a great path, and look forward to keeping up with how it's moving forwards. So, thanks. Over.
All right. Thanks for letting us know. Appreciate it. Well, very good, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Have a good weekend. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.